Dubai 2013. The lights of a luxury villa flickered against the dark night sky, but inside the atmosphere was anything but serene. Outside the gated home, flashing red and blue lights painted the street as police cars lined the driveway. Curious neighbors gathered quietly in the shadows, whispering among themselves, their eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before them. From behind the villa's ornate doors, officers emerged carrying a stretcher. On it lay the lifeless body of Rashid Al Mansoori, a wealthy businessman whose name was once associated with power, influence, and success. His death was sudden, shocking, and above all, violent. At the edge of the room sat his wife, Leila Haddad, her elegant dress torn, her face streaked with tears. Only hours earlier, she had been the silent partner in one of Dubai's most prominent marriages. Now, she was the central figure in a case that would expose betrayal, rage, and deadly consequences. The whispers of the neighbors grew louder. How could such a tragedy unfold in a household that seemed to have everything? A lavish lifestyle, wealth beyond measure, two beautiful children. Yet within those walls, secrets festered, secrets that surveillance cameras would one day reveal. Because in this story, it wasn't gossip or rumor that tore apart the illusion of perfection. It was cold, unblinking evidence. Footage from a single CCTV camera became the spark that set off a chain of events no one could stop. In a city where appearances are everything and reputations are carefully guarded, one woman's discovery of her husband's affair would ignite a confrontation that ended in death. And it all began with one CCTV camera. In 2013, Rashid Al Mansoori was the kind of man who seemed to have it all. He was 35, tall, immaculately dressed, and carried himself with the quiet authority that only wealth and power can bring. Born into one of Dubai's well-connected families, Rashid grew up with privilege. His father had laid the foundation of a thriving construction business, and Rashid had inherited not just the company, but also the belief that rules rarely applied to him. By the time Dubai's real estate market boomed in the early 2010s, Rashid was at the center of it. His construction firm secured lucrative contracts, building villas and commercial complexes across the city. His name carried weight in business circles, and he was often featured in society magazines at charity galas and business events. To the outside world, he was a picture of success, a modern Emirati entrepreneur thriving in a city of ambition. But behind the polished public image, Rashid was very different. Friends described him as charming but also arrogant, a man who demanded loyalty but rarely gave it in return. He liked control over his employees, his home, and especially over his wife. Rashid believed that his wealth and social standing gave him immunity from consequence. He had mistresses, casual flings, and in 2013, a young personal assistant who had become far more than an employee. Rashid felt untouchable. In his mind, infidelity was not betrayal, it was entitlement. What mattered was that his wife remained quiet, his family's reputation intact, and the world continued to see him as the respectable businessman. His fatal flaw was clear: pride and entitlement mixed with an inability to accept confrontation. For Rashid, being challenged, especially by his wife, was unthinkable. If Rashid represented power and wealth, Leila Haddad symbolized grace and resilience. At 30 years old, she had already spent nearly a decade in Dubai, building a life that looked enviable from the outside. Born in Palestine, she had grown up in a family that valued education and dignity above all else. Leila studied literature at university before moving to the UAE, where she worked briefly as a teacher. Her marriage to Rashid in 2005 was seen by many as a fortunate match. He was wealthy, influential, and ready to settle down. She was elegant, educated, and brought a quiet strength to the household. For the first few years, Leila played the role expected of her: devoted wife, gracious hostess, and later, loving mother to their two children. She appeared at public functions at Rashid's side, dressed impeccably, admired for her poise. Yet behind the closed doors of their lavish villa, Leila's life was lonelier than it seemed. Rashid traveled often under the guise of business trips. He returned home distracted, impatient, and sometimes volatile. Though he provided her with every material comfort, designer clothes, luxury cars, staff to manage the household, he withheld the one thing she longed for most, genuine companionship. Leila's suspicions grew over the years. Late-night calls, whispered conversations, and unexplained absences gnawed at her peace of mind. But like many women in her position, she swallowed her doubts, convincing herself that preserving the marriage and protecting her children's future mattered more than confrontation. She was intelligent enough to see the signs, yet restrained by tradition and fear of scandal. Leila was not weak. Friends described her as thoughtful, kind, and surprisingly strong-willed when pushed. She had endured years of emotional distance, but deep inside, a quiet fire burned. She believed in respect, in trust, and in honesty. Rashid had broken all three. Her flaw was not blindness, it was endurance. She suppressed her instincts for too long, ignoring the voice that told her the truth, until the day came when evidence left her no choice but to act. In many ways, Rashid and Leila were opposites. He was the entitled son of privilege, accustomed to bending rules to his will. She was the dutiful wife who tried to build a life on loyalty, grace, and quiet strength. Their marriage, from the outside, looked unshakable. A wealthy businessman and his elegant wife raising children in one of Dubai's most exclusive neighborhoods. But beneath the surface, cracks were widening. Rashid's arrogance and affairs clashed with Leila's silent endurance. For years, she had chosen silence over confrontation. For years, he had assumed her silence was compliance. In 2013, those paths finally collided. A single CCTV camera, cold, impartial, and unblinking, would strip away all illusions. For Leila, it became the undeniable proof of betrayal she could no longer ignore. For Rashid, it became the fuse that would ignite his fury at being exposed. And from that moment, their marriage was no longer about appearances. It was about survival. For years, the marriage of Rashid Al Mansoori and Leila Haddad was held up as an example of Dubai's glamorous high society. They lived in a sprawling villa in Jumeirah, hosted dinner parties for business associates, and appeared at charity galas in elegant attire. Their photographs often made it into society pages. Rashid, the powerful businessman, and Leila, the poised and graceful wife. Together, they looked like the embodiment of success. But beneath the glittering surface, cracks had begun to form. Rashid's attention to his wife had dwindled. What started as small signs, distracted conversations, fewer evenings spent together, soon grew into long business trips, nights away from home, and unexplained phone calls at odd hours. Leila would wait up for him, dinner laid out, only to hear the same excuse. "Work is keeping me late." In Dubai's fast-moving world of construction and business, these explanations sounded plausible, yet Leila's instincts told her something was amiss. She tried to suppress her doubts, telling herself that this was the price of marrying a man of influence. Many women in her circle endured the same. Wealthy husbands who were absent, distracted, or unfaithful, but who provided financial comfort and social standing. For a time, Leila convinced herself to stay silent, focusing on her children, her household, and maintaining the image of a stable marriage. But in 2013, a new presence entered their lives, and with it, the cracks widened. Rashid had hired a personal assistant, a young Filipina named Amina in her mid-20s. She was efficient, hardworking, and always by Rashid's side. At first, Leila welcomed her politely. She knew Rashid needed help managing his busy schedule, and Amina seemed respectful and diligent. But soon, her presence became harder to ignore. Leila noticed how often Rashid mentioned Amina, how her name came up casually in conversations at home. When the phone rang late at night, it was often Amina. "It's work," Rashid would insist, brushing off Leila's questions. But the tone of his voice, the way he left the room to speak privately, told a different story. The changes were subtle, but to a wife who had spent years watching closely, they were unmistakable. Rashid began dressing more carefully for the office, buying new colognes, even staying late at meetings that never seemed to end. And though he denied everything, Leila could see the shift. His attention had moved elsewhere. When she tried to confront him gently, asking if his relationship with Amina was strictly professional, Rashid's response was dismissive, even cold. She works for me. Don't start imagining things, he said sharply. His words cut deeper than he realized. It wasn't just denial, it was dismissal, a warning that her suspicions were an inconvenience he refused to acknowledge. The distance between them grew. Meals were taken in silence, the air in the villa thick with unspoken tension. Leila found herself replaying small details in her mind, a perfume scent on Rashid's clothes that wasn't hers, a missed family dinner where he claimed to be working late with Amina. Each incident added weight to the doubts she carried. Friends began to notice Leila's unease. She was quieter at gatherings, her once effortless smile strained. To them, she looked like a woman trying to hold together an image that was slipping through her fingers. The irony was bitter. The more Leila pushed down her suspicions, the bolder Rashid seemed to become. He had grown used to her silence, confident she would never challenge him. He saw her as loyal, obedient, and in his world, silence equaled compliance. But Leila was not blind, nor was she as submissive as Rashid believed. Beneath her calm exterior, anger and hurt were building. She had endured years of distance and neglect, but seeing her husband openly flaunt his closeness with Amina was different. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation played out in her own home. By the summer of 2013, the cracks in their marriage were no longer invisible. The glamorous facade remained intact for the world, but behind the villa's ornate doors, tension simmered like a storm waiting to break. And soon proof would come, undeniable, unblinking, captured on camera, that Leila's suspicions had always been right. By mid-2013, Rashid's absences had become routine. His construction empire gave him every excuse. Late-night site visits, weekend meetings with investors, sudden trips to Abu Dhabi. But beneath the polished cover of business, Rashid was leading a double life. His personal assistant, Amina, had become far more than just an employee. What began as a professional relationship, scheduling meetings, managing calls, accompanying him to events, gradually blurred into something intimate. Rashid enjoyed the attention she gave him, the admiration in her eyes, the way she never questioned his authority. To him, Amina was young, attractive, and compliant, everything he felt entitled to outside of his marriage. The affair was not hidden carefully. Rashid used office hours, late dinners, even an apartment leased under one of his company's names. Staff whispered, drivers noticed the patterns, but no one dared speak out. Rashid's wealth and influence made him untouchable. But Leila was watching. Her suspicions, already sharp, grew sharper. When Rashid returned home smelling of a different perfume, she noticed. When his phone vibrated late at night with Amina's name on the screen, she memorized it. When he claimed to be at the office, but appeared restless and evasive, she filed it away in her mind. The turning point came one ordinary evening. Rashid had returned late, irritable, and gone straight to bed. Leila, restless and unable to sleep, went to the living room. Their villa, like many in Dubai, had CCTV cameras installed for security, a common practice after a rise in villa burglaries in the early 2010s. Typically, only the security staff checked the recordings, but that night, Leila sat at the monitor. At first, the footage looked ordinary. Household staff moving about, the children playing, Rashid arriving and leaving at scheduled times. But as she scrubbed through the timeline, something caught her eye. A time-stamped clip showed Rashid entering the villa in the afternoon while she had been out shopping. Minutes later, Amina appeared at the door. Leila leaned closer, her heart pounding. The grainy footage revealed Rashid leading Amina inside, their body language unmistakable, close, familiar, intimate. On the screen, Leila saw the unthinkable, her husband and his assistant together, laughing, whispering, touching in ways that no husband should with another woman. The camera had no sound, but it didn't need it. The images were enough. Rashid had brought his mistress into their home, the very place where their children played, where their family gathered for meals. For a long moment, Leila sat frozen, unable to breathe. Then the flood of emotions came. Humiliation, anger, heartbreak, fury. Years of doubt had just crystallized into truth she could no longer ignore. Her silence, the weapon she had wielded to preserve her marriage, was shattered by the unblinking eye of a security camera. She replayed the footage again and again, each time her rage growing. The betrayal was not only personal, it was public in the cruelest way. Anyone on the household staff who glimpsed the footage would know. Her husband had disgraced her not quietly, but brazenly within the walls of their own villa. Leila's mind spun. She could confront him with the footage, demand answers, or even leave. But leaving was complicated. Divorce in Dubai in 2013 carried stigma, especially for women in high-profile marriages. Custody of her children, her reputation, even her financial security, all of it could be stripped away if she challenged Rashid openly. Yet how could she stay silent now? For Leila, the CCTV clip was not just evidence. It was a point of no return. She had endured neglect, dismissals, and suspicions for years, but now she had proof, cold, undeniable proof, that her marriage was a lie. And soon she would decide to use that proof against Rashid. A confrontation was coming, one that would tear away the last mask of their perfect life. For days after discovering the CCTV footage, Leila Haddad lived in a haze of rage and disbelief. She replayed the clip again and again, unable to stop herself, each viewing cutting deeper into her pride. Rashid had not only betrayed her, he had brought his mistress into their own villa, the very heart of their marriage. At first, she tried to keep her composure. She smiled for the children, carried on with the household routines, even attended a charity function with Rashid by her side, her expression calm, her gown immaculate. But inside, she burned. Every time Rashid's phone lit up, every time he left with vague excuses, she felt the sting of humiliation anew. By late summer 2013, Leila's silence was no longer possible. One evening after the children had gone to bed and the staff had withdrawn for the night, she made her decision. She set the stage carefully. Rashid would come home, as usual, from another meeting. She would be waiting. The truth, captured on tape, would finally confront him. When Rashid entered the living room, still in his tailored suit, his cufflinks catching the light, he found Leila already seated by the television. Her face was calm, almost too calm. On the screen, paused at a still frame, was the grainy black and white image of him and Amina entering the villa. "What is this?" Rashid demanded, his voice sharp. Leila pressed play. The footage rolled forward, showing his unmistakable gestures, his closeness with the young assistant. The silence in the room grew heavier with each passing second. At first, Rashid tried denial. "This is nothing," he snapped. "She works for me, don't invent stories from a camera." But Leila's eyes did not waver. "Do not insult me with lies," she said quietly, her voice trembling not with fear but with fury. "I have watched the footage, I know everything. You brought her here, Rashid, into our home." Her calmness unsettled him more than shouting would have. He stood abruptly, pacing, his hands clenched. "You've been spying on me," he accused. "Going through cameras like some detective. This is shameful, Leila. You dare to watch me in my own house." Her composure cracked. "Shameful," she cried, rising to her feet. "Shameful is betraying your wife. Shameful is disgracing your family in this house. You think I would not see? You think I would stay blind forever?" The argument spiraled, voices rising, echoing against the marble walls. Leila demanded respect, demanded truth. Rashid lashed back with insults, calling her paranoid, ungrateful, hysterical. "You have everything," he shouted. "A villa, wealth, children who want for nothing, and still you complain. Do you know how many women would give anything to be in your place?" Tears welled in Leila's eyes, but her voice was steel. "I did not marry you for wealth. I married you for love, and you destroyed it with your arrogance, with your lies." Rashid's fury deepened. Cornered by the evidence, his pride lashed out. In a fit of bravado, he admitted what she already knew. "Yes, I care for her. Amina understands me in ways you never did." The words struck like a blow. Leila staggered back, her hand to her chest, as though her heart itself had been pierced. The woman she had once politely welcomed into their household was not just an assistant, she was her replacement in Rashid's eyes. Her voice cracked into a cry. "After everything I gave you, you stand here and tell me you love her." The shouting grew so loud that the maid hurried the children upstairs. shielding them from the chaos below. Neighbors later testified they could hear the echoes through the walls, a man's furious tone, a woman's sobs, the clash of accusations hurling like weapons. Rashid's arrogance only fed the fire. He loomed over her, his voice booming. "You will not disgrace me with your drama, do you understand? No one will believe you. I am Rashid Al Mansoori. You are nothing without my name." Leila's fury burst. "Without your name? I am still a woman, a wife, a mother, and I will not be your prisoner while you flaunt your betrayal in my face." The confrontation teetered on the edge of violence. Rashid's pride would not let him back down. Leila's years of endurance had finally broken into defiance. The air in the villa felt electric, charged with years of silence exploding all at once. What began as calm evidence on a screen had spiraled into a storm of betrayal, confession, and rage. And as the night wore on, that storm would not subside. It would consume everything in its path. The confrontation inside the villa had reached its breaking point. What began with the cold evidence of CCTV footage had spiraled into a storm of accusations, shouting, and wounded pride. The children had been ushered upstairs by the maid, their small voices silenced behind closed doors, while downstairs the marriage unraveled in real time. Rashid's rage grew darker with every word. For a man who thrived on power, being exposed was intolerable. His wife had dared to confront him, dared to accuse him in his own home. To Rashid, this was more than a domestic argument. It was an attack on his authority, his very identity as a husband and a man of status. Leila stood her ground, trembling but unyielding. She had endured too many years of neglect, humiliation, and silence. Tonight she could not be silenced. She threw his words back at him with fury. "You call yourself a husband, but you are nothing but a liar. You betrayed me, Rashid. You betrayed us all." The insults cut him deeply, not because they were untrue, but because they threatened his pride. His voice thundered through the villa, and in that moment Rashid crossed a line. He lunged forward, grabbing her by the wrist, his grip iron tight. Leila gasped in pain, struggling to free herself. "Don't you dare speak to me this way," he growled. His eyes burned with a dangerous intensity, his breath hot with rage. He shoved her back against the edge of the table, his strength overwhelming. Leila cried out, tears streaming down her face. She clawed at his arms, desperate to break free. "Stop, Rashid, please think of the children," she begged, but the words did not reach him. Years of entitlement and unchecked anger had boiled over into violence. In desperation, Leila reached for anything within her grasp. Her hand closed around a heavy glass vase sitting on the table, a decorative piece, tall and ornate. She raised it with trembling hands, warning him to let her go. But Rashid only tightened his grip, his voice dripping with contempt. "You will never leave me. You are mine, Leila, do you hear me? Mine." In that instant, fear and survival overcame hesitation. With all her strength, Leila swung the vase. It connected with the side of Rashid's head with a sickening crack. His grip released instantly. He staggered backward, eyes wide in shock, then collapsed onto the marble floor. The sound of the vase shattering echoed through the villa, followed by a silence that was almost unbearable. For a moment, the only sound was Leila's ragged breathing. She stood frozen, the broken shards glittering around her feet, staring at her husband's motionless body. "Rashid," she whispered, her voice breaking. She fell to her knees beside him, shaking his shoulder, but there was no response. Blood pooled beneath his head, seeping into the marble's pristine lines. Leila's sobs filled the room as the reality settled in. In one moment of desperate defense, she had ended her husband's life. The man she had once loved, the father of her children, lay dead before her, not by accident, but by her own hand. The villa, once a symbol of their wealth and power, had transformed into a crime scene. The crystal chandeliers still glowed above. The scent of expensive incense still lingered in the air, but the opulence felt grotesque now. The silence was heavy, suffocating, broken only by Leila's quiet cries. Upstairs, the children remained hidden, unaware of the tragedy that had just unfolded. The maid, frightened by the sounds of violence, dared not return to the living room. And outside, the streets of Dubai remained alive with the hum of cars and city lights, oblivious to the catastrophe behind the villa's ornate walls. Leila sat beside Rashid's body, her mind spinning. She had not meant for this to happen. She had wanted the truth, justice, respect. Instead, she had blood on her hands, and the weight of it was crushing. As she stared at the still form of her husband, one truth became clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The echoes of the confrontation lingered long after Rashid's final breath. The maid, terrified by the shouting and the crash of glass, had locked herself upstairs with the children. She listened in silence, praying it would end, until she realized something was terribly wrong. Minutes passed without a sound from below. Finally, trembling, she picked up the phone and called security at the villa compound. Within minutes, 2 guards arrived, knocking on the ornate front door. Leila, pale and shaking, opened it. Her clothes were stained, her eyes swollen from tears. "Help, please," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. When they stepped inside, the scene was unmistakable. Rashid Al Mansoori lay lifeless on the marble floor, blood seeping beneath his head. The guards immediately contacted Dubai police. By the time officers arrived, the villa's tranquility had been replaced with flashing sirens and hurried footsteps. Detective Omar Rahman, a seasoned investigator, took charge. What struck him instantly was the surreal contrast: luxury furnishings, crystal chandeliers, and in the middle of it all, a scene of violence. Leila sat on the sofa, still in shock, rocking slightly as if trying to wake herself from a nightmare. On the television, paused footage from the villa's CCTV system still displayed Rashid entering with his personal assistant, Amina. The unblinking screen seemed to tell its own story. The investigators began piecing together the chain of events. The maid confirmed hearing hours of shouting and a crash. Neighbors testified they had overheard angry voices through the villa walls. Forensics documented the shattered vase, the bruises on Leila's arms, and the fatal head wound on Rashid. The timeline grew clearer. Leila discovered the affair through the CCTV recordings, confronted her husband, and the confrontation escalated violently. The evidence showed Rashid had been aggressive, fingerprints on Leila's wrist, marks consistent with force. But it was Leila's desperate act of defense that ended his life. Amina was quickly brought in for questioning. Tearful, she admitted to the affair but insisted she had no part in the killing. "He said he would leave her," she confessed quietly. "But I swear, I never wanted this." Her testimony, though damning in terms of motive, reinforced that the deadly night had unfolded only between husband and wife. As news spread, the case quickly became infamous. Headlines called it the 2013 Dubai CCTV affair murder. Media outlets latched onto the scandal. A wealthy businessman, his loyal wife, a young assistant, and a camera that revealed what no one was supposed to see. For Dubai, a city obsessed with image, the case was both shocking and symbolic. Behind the gleaming facades of villas and towers, darker truths simmered: pride, betrayal, and violence. And now one family's secrets were laid bare for the world to see. Here's the trial and legal proceedings section, expanded into 600 words, keeping the cinematic true crime narration style consistent. The trial of Leila Haddad began in late 2013, only months after that deadly night inside the Al Mansoori villa. From the moment the case reached the courtroom, it drew widespread attention. The name of Rashid Al Mansoori carried weight in Dubai's business world, and his sudden, violent death had become the subject of hushed whispers across the city. Now the question hung heavy in the air. Was Leila a cold-blooded killer or a desperate woman pushed too far? Leila entered the courtroom wearing a simple black abaya, her face pale and drawn. She was no longer the poised society wife seen at galas and charity events. She looked fragile, even broken. Yet behind her eyes was something else, a resolve to tell her story, to make the judges understand. The prosecution wasted no time laying out its argument. According to them, Leila had discovered her husband's affair and, in a fit of rage, planned the confrontation. She had armed herself with the knowledge of the CCTV footage and deliberately provoked Rashid until violence broke out. The shattered vase, they argued, was not an act of defense but an intentional strike, aimed to kill. This was not an accident, the prosecutor declared firmly. This was a calculated act driven by jealousy and anger. The accused struck her husband with deadly force. She chose violence, and that choice ended a man's life. The defense countered with an entirely different narrative. Leila's lawyer painted her not as a vengeful wife, but as a woman trapped in years of emotional neglect and control, finally breaking under the weight of betrayal. The CCTV footage, they argued, was not ammunition for revenge but unavoidable proof that had forced her to confront her husband. This was not murder, her lawyer insisted. This was self-defense. Rashid attacked her, left bruises on her arms, and threatened her. In her desperation to protect herself, she grabbed what was within reach. She never intended to kill, only to survive. The courtroom became a stage for testimony. The maid described hearing the shouting, the sound of furniture crashing, and Leila's desperate cries for Rashid to stop. She confirmed that Rashid had a temper, that arguments were not uncommon in the villa. Neighbors testified too, recalling the echoes of a man's furious voice and a woman pleading in terror on the night of the murder. Their words painted a picture of escalation, not premeditation. Then came Amina, the personal assistant at the center of the scandal. Reluctant and visibly shaken, she admitted to the affair. Her testimony confirmed what Leila had seen. Rashid had brought her into the villa, disrespecting his wife in the most humiliating way possible. "I never wanted this to happen," she said softly, eyes downcast. "I never thought it would end like this." For Leila, the most painful moment came when her children were mentioned. Too young to testify formally, their voices were heard through statements gathered by social workers. They spoke of a father who was often absent, a mother who cried when she thought they were asleep, and a night filled with terrifying shouts. The judges weighed everything carefully. On one side, a wealthy, powerful man dead at the hands of his wife. On the other, a woman cornered by betrayal, humiliation, and violence. Dubai's legal system was strict, but it also recognized provocation and self-defense as mitigating factors. When the verdict was finally delivered, the courtroom fell silent. Leila was convicted not of premeditated murder, but of manslaughter. The judges acknowledged that Rashid had initiated violence and that Leila had acted in the heat of the moment, driven by fear and desperation. Her sentence, a lengthy prison term, but far less than what the prosecution had demanded. Gasps filled the room. Rashid's relatives shook their heads in outrage, insisting justice had not been fully served. Maria's family wept quietly, relieved that she would not face the harshest punishment, yet broken by the knowledge that her life, like Rashid's, had been destroyed forever. As Leila was led away in handcuffs, the case closed with a verdict that reflected not only the evidence but also the complexity of human emotions: betrayal, pride, fear, and rage. It was not the ending anyone wanted, but it was the only one the law could deliver. The tragedy of Rashid and Leila's marriage was not simply the story of two people. It was a reflection of deeper forces at play in Dubai's society in 2013. At its heart was the price of secrets and betrayal in a world obsessed with image. To their neighbors and friends, the Al Mansoori marriage looked perfect: wealth, status, children, and a lavish villa. But behind the facade lay years of neglect, infidelity, and silence. The CCTV footage stripped away the illusion and revealed a truth too painful to ignore. Technology itself became a character in this story. The unblinking lens of a security camera meant to protect the villa became the silent witness that ended a marriage. In earlier times, Leila might never have had proof, but in a city wired with surveillance, even the most private secrets could surface. The footage was not just evidence. It was the spark that ignited a confrontation that turned fatal. Gender roles also shaped the tragedy. Rashid believed his wealth gave him freedom to control his wife, to take a mistress without consequence. Leila, by contrast, endured years of humiliation, silenced by tradition and fear of scandal. But when pushed to the breaking point, her silence erupted into defiance. The same society that expected her to remain quiet forced her to act when the betrayal became undeniable. Finally, the case reflected Dubai itself in 2013, a booming city of luxury and ambition, where behind closed doors, human flaws remained the same: pride, jealousy, and rage. Beneath the glass towers and guarded villas, the struggles of love, control, and betrayal were as raw as anywhere else. From the outside, the Al Mansoori family lived a life of perfection, wealth, privilege, and respect. But behind the walls of their luxurious villa, cracks had been spreading for years, hidden beneath silence and pride. When Leila discovered her husband's affair, it was not gossip or rumor that exposed him, but the cold, unblinking eye of a CCTV camera. That footage, meant for security, became the key that unlocked betrayal, humiliation, and ultimately tragedy. In a single night, what began as a confrontation spiraled into violence. Rashid's arrogance and Leila's fury collided, and the home that symbolized success became a crime scene. The courtroom verdict may have offered a measure of justice, but no sentence could erase the loss. Rashid was dead, Leila's freedom stripped away, and 2 children left to grow up with only the echoes of that night. One wife's search for truth ended not in answers, but in blood, and one camera captured the secret that destroyed a family. In 2013, Dubai, a confrontation over betrayal ended not in reconciliation, but in death.